all week long I've been getting this stuff, I like what somebody told me a few weeks ago. Said, we know when you preach, you just get up there and open your mouth, and whatever comes out, and you get lucky sometimes. And I'm like, I know it looks like that, but I really put more work through the week into it than all of that. And so this week, it just kept coming, and I don't know how I'm going to say all of this. I don't know what is going to happen, but I'm really excited because I got friends coming. I got a friend here this week, right now over the weekend, and it was great visiting with him yesterday. And we went to the studio, and he cut a ukulele track. You don't run into ukulele players every day. It was fun. And in a couple of weeks, I got a friend coming, and I remember we used to sing this song that, golly bum, I don't even know if I can remember. Well, I ran across an old box of letters. I was searching for some things to goodwill. So I don't know why I thought of that, because this week I was looking through boxes of stuff, and I ran across some things that I haven't seen in a long time. And one of them was a little CD case, and when I popped it open, it had a couple of CDs in there that I thought I lost. And there was this one by Burlap the Cashmere. So they had to learn this piece really quick, and they did a great job. So in the text, the Pharisees are grumbling, and Jesus tells a story about a sick and twisted father. A sick and twisted man who would run down the road. Do you know how disgraceful that was? Because he had to lift his robe to run and expose his ankles, and no man in that culture would act in such a disgraceful way. He was such an unfair father, such an unfair man who gives everything to this returning son, and he has to stand and feel the anger and the wrath of the older son. And no one is even questioning why this parent acted in such a way back in the beginning of the story, when the kid comes and says, give me and let me leave and take with me. I don't know where this kid grew up, but my dad would have said, you can leave when you're ready, but you're taking with you what you brought when you showed up. And that was nothing. What kind of parent? Someone would call CPS on this parent. Don't you think they would? That's not wise parenting. And so we all have heard this story over and over again, and we have all found a place that we could identify. Some of us have been the prodigal. I think probably all of us have our prodigal story. And some of us have been the older brother, and I think all of us have had our older brother story. It should cost everyone the same thing it costs me. Or put more simply, the older brother's statement is quite frankly just this: I'm not happy. And we spend all our life identifying with one brother or the other, and probably the character we have become in the story is the Pharisees at the beginning, who are simply grumbling because grace is given to sinners. And it's okay if we're that sinner, but as soon as we're not, we're like the person who used to smoke and just quit and is on a mission to tell everybody why they shouldn't smoke, and they already know it. But it occurs to me one more time that Jesus tells these stories so that they might transform our lives. Jesus tells us these stories so that we can find out something about the character and the nature of God, and that we might emulate that our lives and the world about us might be transformed. Does anyone know a better purpose for studying the parables of Jesus? And there's always a character in the story that acts like God, and that character is the one that we are called to emulate. What God do you worship? And what are the characteristics of that God? Is your God just and fair? Is your God just and fair and wise? You know, I think what happened to me very early in life was the first story I learned about God set me down the wrong path, and I never understood God until I had children. And it wasn't in the blessing, it was in the disappointments. The things I would never relay to my children. They are mine to internalize. But there was this story about humans in the presence of God who became disobedient, and God evicted them from God's presence. And so from that day forward, I knew that if I were disobedient, God would abandon me. And from that day forward, I did what generations have done, and that is internalize abandonment. Do you know what that's like? And then one day I was reading the text again, and there was this really beautiful verse right in the very end of the story as they're leaving the garden, and it says that the Lord God made garments of skin for the man and for his wife, and he clothed them as they're leaving. God is like, I think we should go to the mall and maybe do some shopping before you go off to school, kids. Before you leave for work, before you get married, we're going to have a party and we're going to give you gifts because you're going to be free now to eat from the land around you, to make your own way. If your God is an evictor, you may be like me. You may still be internalizing abandonment issues. But if you've ever struggled with watching your children and going, I wish they would, the story no longer makes sense. And Jesus is always finding these cloaked references, these veiled pieces of God's character, and illuminating them in a story about a father who is not wise, who is not fair, and who is not just. But he is hopeful. He is a reconciler. You see, we have spent all our lives identifying with the character of the prodigal or the character of the older brother, and we have lived lives seeking transformation. And Jesus is there saying even today, if you want to be transformed, find the God character in the story and emulate that character. But how do we do it? Because we've seen what happens. We know that life is disappointing, and we know that things don't always go right. Sometimes the prodigal doesn't come home. Sometimes the parent gets a call in the middle of the night. And yet, there is God, hoping beyond all reason, confident enough to emancipate and to gift the children and send them into the land to eat from what God has prepared. Don't stop. This is not a story about your children or my children or the way that they have disappointed us or that the hopes that we have had for them that they have not realized. This is not a story about the scholarships that I did not take to college and disappointed my mother. This is not a story about your years in the faraway land or your journey home. This is a story about life and how God wants us to live life. Man, right now, I want it. Right now. I'm 53, and I don't want to give up the dreams I had when I was 18. I don't want to lose the passion for life. My body hurts. My legs hurt. My back hurts. And I don't want to give up hiking and walking and reaching for the gold star. I don't want to quit because my body hurts. things cloud my mind. And at the end of the day, I have very little intimacy and very little time left for my wife and for my children and for my family and my home. And I don't want to lose it. I don't want to die and forget the joy of making love. I don't want to die and forget what it's like to stand and see the sunrise on the top of the mountain and know how hard it was to get up there. I don't want my body and my troubles to defeat me and steal from me the joy of life, and then my children deal with the abandonment of my confidence and my love. Don't let that happen. Emulate the Father. Never give up. Never give up. Be passion when they can't summon it up. Be their passion. Be their confidence. If you have to wait 3 years for the phone to ring, 5 years for the phone to ring, don't stop watching the phone. Stay on the porch. If you have to breathe life over and over again into the dying pieces of your life, give it away. Breathe it in there. Don't stop believing it. Because when you stop believing, everybody that looked to you for hope will die around you in the faraway land. Emulate the Father. Be transformed. Move your place from the prodigal or the older son and stop being the grumbling Pharisee and become the Father. Emulate perfect love, because perfect love transforms us into God. Last illustration. This probably should have been at the front. I watched that movie again this week. I think John Goodman was born to play Babe Ruth, and now he can go to his retirement. It was wonderful characterization of one of the biggest, hugest figures of our time. A person who emulated everything about the prodigal. A man whose parents abandoned him to an orphanage in Baltimore as a young child. A man who never stopped trying to make up for that. Do you know people like that? Are you like that? And so he became this voracious beast, is the way that they describe him in the movie. His first wife says, "You're not human, you must be a beast," because of his off-the-field antics. And then he goes out there and he does crazy things like, the first man to hit the ball out of, what was the park in Pittsburgh? Nobody hit a ball over that field, over that fence, but Babe Ruth pointing out there and pow, and striking out so many times. Do you know who the strikeout king of baseball is? It's Babe Ruth. But there's a scene where he tells Lou Gehrig, stop hitting it over the right field fence because they're left-handers. And he goes, that's the short one. Hit it center or left or quit hitting it out. And then he walks up and he smacks one over the center field fence and he's rounding the bases. And you hear the statement of his wife again when someone says, he's not human, he's a beast. And it's Gehrig who says, no, he's not a beast, he's a god. It stings a little to hear it. Emulate the God character in the story. Never stop believing. Don't give up. Be generous with your passion, with God's love. Be generous. Be wasteful. And then wait for God. We need to pray.